welcome to our session, From Strategy to Success, where we'll be really going through and deep diving into real-world cases and examples of commercial success within digital health. I am absolutely pumped to be here today. I'm going to maybe do a quick intro and then hand it off to Sophia here. My name is Trey Chamberlain. I'm a principal with the Alexander Group, and I lead our healthcare practice. And essentially at the Alexander Group, we do revenue growth consulting. The easiest way to think about that is simply to say, well, gosh, when digital health and healthcare service companies and medtech companies want to grow top-line results, revenue, acquisitions, organic, inorganic, whatever it is, they come to us and we do strategic as well as execution-centric consulting engagements for them. Now, you might listen to that and say, interesting, not overly relevant to me. The great news is that underneath our consulting engagements, we have a bevy of data. We go out, we talk to providers, we talk to other digital health, healthcare services organizations, and it provides us this really unique view of the market and what's happening both on the buyer and the provider side overall. And so in today's session, we're going to really kind of double click into kind of the academic things. What are the data points and the prevalent trends that we are seeing? And then we're going to hear from Sophia, who's actually going to bring those concepts to life for us. Sophia Kim is the Chief Growth Officer at Heartbeat Health. Would you like to do a quick introduction, Sophia?
Thank you, Trey. I'm really excited to be here. Chief Growth Officer of Heartbeat Health. We are the nation's largest virtual cardiology practice. So you might say, hey, how do you do cardiology without a stethoscope and seeing the person? There's a lot of data and a lot of diagnostics behind the scenes. We help enhance the care as well as enhance the capacity and availability of cardiology care. So we partner with at-risk provider groups, ACOs and payers, as well as in-home assessment companies to go out and deliver care virtually and keep that member as virtual as possible for as long as possible, bending the cost curve.
Absolutely. And Sophia's been a little modest. She's also had stops at Change Healthcare, Altegra, various other organizations. I'm going to ask her to draw upon those experiences as we go through. I'm going to ask you to bear with me, though, as we kind of go through what I would maybe consider an academic framework that I hope will help set the stage for the conversation. I mentioned we go through a lot of different research initiatives within my organization. And one of the ones we did recently is we went out and we talked about 200 different chief customer officers, chief growth officers, whatever the term is, right? Essentially the individuals that are responsible for the sales, marketing, and service strategy of the organization. And we said, great. What are you thinking about for 2025? How do you plan to essentially grow top-line revenue? And as you can imagine, we heard all sorts of stuff. That allowed us to kind of take a step back and say, well, we're going to call these growth plays. And we're going to kind of isolate the top 9 growth plays because, people might say, well, I want to enter a new market, or I just want to get better EBITDA, or I want to XYZ, whatever it is. And we kind of, again, boil those down into 9 growth plays, and then we use the funnel Pareto principle, because I'm a consultant and I'm legally mandated to do that. And I have to come back and say, great, where are most of those responses falling? And really, then that allowed us to isolate one more time these 5 growth plays that I'm going to talk through. What you'll also notice is that we were able to categorize these growth plays across what you might think about as 3 overarching business objectives, right? I need top of funnel activity, awareness. I need profitability or productivity lifts, or I just need to increase my lifetime customer value. And so these growth plays are either going to align to one or multiple of these different objectives. We want to kind of, again, go through them quickly and then we'll put them into real world practice with Sophia. The first one there is increased demand generation. And so as you kind of think about organizations, particularly in digital health and services, they're scaling very quickly. And what usually the thing that we see the most is that the share of wallet will expand within existing logos, but going out and getting net new buyers and net new logos is prohibitively difficult. What do you see coming here? Growth play number 1, you start to see organization invest in lead generation. Now that could look as simple as Trey, the new college grad, starts dialing for dollars in an outbound motion, and it can also be a 200 to 300K business development executive that brings in a Rolodex and goes out and finds very specific logos and actually lands them for the organization. A recent Alexander Group study actually cited from marketing professionals lead generation resources, and in particular lead generation or sales development reps, those outbound resources, are the number 1 investment area for marketing organizations, closely followed by content and marketing AI, right? So we've got our first growth play, obviously an awareness play. In addition to that, then you start looking at growth play 2, omni-channel strategy. Dirty little secret, 85% of sales calls pre-COVID were face-to-face. That means sales reps, marketing, service, etc. There was still some component of virtual interaction. What we're now seeing is that providers, buyers, etc., they want to be interacted with across various channels, and it doesn't always look like 85% of the time I'm seeing my rep in person. 62% of hospital executives said, I'll see a rep in person. They also cited the website and the rep as equally beneficial in terms of the information source. What you're kind of seeing is the top organizations are leaning into different channels, different ways to interact with their buyers and get their messages across. We oftentimes look at pharma as a really good example of that in cutting edge. Excuse me. The third one, well, last year in digital health, over 2/3 of organizations either experienced a merger and acquisition event or anticipated one in the next 12 months. And as I think we all know, the market is only heating up from an institutional investment perspective. We see a lot of new product innovation. It can be organic, it can be, again, a tuck-in fold site of care expansion, whatever it is. And the best organizations are being very purposeful about how they bring these new products to life. Now, again, we're in the AI pavilion, so it'd be remiss if I didn't cover some of those very specific topics, but unsurprisingly, hopefully to everyone in this room, 98% of hospital executives said, I anticipate AI to actually impact how I care for my patients over the next year. All right, makes a good bit of sense. Interesting enough though, that AI, the majority of it, about 50% plus actually said, where I believe the AI will best help me is from hospital operations. Right? And so you see this really massive investment appetite for AI within hospital operations, at least from the acute side. So you see a lot again of this new product introduction, freshness indexes, etc. Number 4, post-land resources. This would be essentially anyone who touches a customer or buyer after a product is bought. The most common example that we often see in the industry and what we've seen kind of in a prolific rise over the past couple of years is the customer success manager. It's about value realization. It's about touching and wrapping your arms around the customer. With that being said, 49% increase in investment for post-land resources, of which digital health organizations surveyed 54% of those investments will actually be specifically for customer success reps, right? So you're kind of getting the story here that says, hey, you know what, we got to get new customers, I got to interact with them multiple ways, I need to bring new products into my pipeline, essentially expand my ability to sell. And then in addition to that, I've got to hold on to these customers and make sure that they're happy post-land. Now the final one that wraps this all up, of course, is great. How do we then enable all of these motions and growth plays together? And that's where we see AI the most. And again, what we're going to talk about today is more so AI from an enablement motion, an enablement tool as opposed to product embedded AI. So think about the 6 most common use cases we'll see is lead scoring, upskill of commercial resources, providing insight, analytics, and talk tracks to your sellers at the right time in the buying process so they know exactly what to say to the right stakeholders. Then you have churn and risk mitigation as well as targeting, and these are very, very common AI use cases that you'll see in the commercial model. So again, in summary, you're kind of seeing these very repetitive 5, sometimes 6 growth plays that are occurring within any digital health or healthcare service organization that is scaling and growing. How's that for a long academic example, huh? So, a lot of these data points I've already talked to, and it's great to, again, kind of think about things in a vacuum, but the reality is putting these things into practice in a real-world setting is really where I believe the most fun is and likely where we can learn the most and gain insight. So, Sophia, maybe this is where you can share your insight with us. And I alluded, we've been to large organizations, billions in revenue. You've been to small, nimble startup organizations. I know you and I last night at dinner talked about demand generation. Maybe share your perspective on where you've kind of seen demand generation work and some of the lessons learned across your career.
Sure. So he's right. Coming from billion-dollar organizations like Change Healthcare, where actually I worked with Trey and we leveraged the Alexander Group to do some of this research. What I would say is, look, it depends on the stage that your company's in, and it depends very much on what you're trying to accomplish. So from a demand gen perspective, right, you're looking at investing in the right resources. Is it a inside sales team that you're trying to grow? Is it more of a strategic play? in my line of business, it is a very strategic sale. So we're not looking at a bunch of sales reps making a bunch of phone calls. We want somebody that's very understanding and ingrained in the industry and knows what they're talking about, right? So when you talk cardiology, you have to talk about, all right, what are the implications? What are comorbidities? What's the clinical care pathway? All of that kind of stuff. I didn't come in knowing that, but the good thing is I have 20 plus years of risk adjustment, which was kind of all the backstop to it, right? So when I came in and joined Heartbeat Health as the Chief Growth Officer, I'm the one person doing all of this, right? Because the company only has enough funds to fund just a few different resources, right? If you're coming from a different layer or a different level company, when you're 200, 300 million, which was my former company right before Heartbeat, you've got a structure, right? Now you can invest on demand gen teams. You can go look at who's going to do your inside sales or who's going to go and farm out all these new leads and pump them into your sales organization for somebody to do, right? As I was looking at as you were talking, one of the real world examples is that can you flip back to the other slide? This enhanced post-sale support, he's absolutely right. Because a lot of times what's happening is you sell the product and then your customers can't figure out how to use it, right? And I'm in a services position, right? There's not much to use. However, there's still an understanding of what am I doing with the data? How do I get this? What's the strategy behind this? How do I use this as your customer to help grow? For a cardiology practice for me, this post-sale support, I'm growing this team right now.
Excellent. Yeah, we are seeing quite a healthy investment there for sure. So you kind of mentioned about constrained resources and investment. You talked about demand generation, you talked about post-sale support. Are there other growth plays that you've considered or maybe even investigated or plan to enact in 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, so we're looking at, is it a business development executive that comes in with their Rolodex? Or is it somebody who's a little bit more junior, right, that costs less, right, will do the work and is really hungry? And I think that's kind of the discussions that I've had with my CEOs in the past, which is, all right, you've got only a finite number of resources. How do you spend it? Do you really put the dollars in on that BD executive that's coming in with the Rolodex? The thing that I have to say about that, though, is you have to be really careful about cultural fit. How many CEOs do you know, or how many groups do you know that have brought in somebody, paid $250,000, $300,000 for that person, and it just doesn't work out, right? 6 months later, you're scratching your head going, what happened to my sales? Why? I've got this brand name person, like they're huge in the industry, but what's going on? Cultural mismatch. So I heard this phrase of culture eats strategy for breakfast way back in my career, and I was thinking, yeah, that's not true. You really need the strategy. You need both, but now I truly believe culture really does trump strategy, because if that person doesn't fit with your team, I don't care how many people they know, an introduction is an introduction. If the rest of the team isn't there to pick it up, it goes nowhere.
Excellent. And maybe some of the ones we haven't touched on is some of the AI stuff. So let's throw Sophia a little bit of a curveball here. In 2024, over 2/3 of organizations said we're going to invest in at least 6 AI use cases from a commercial enablement perspective. This year, 62% are investing in 5 or more. What that data tells us essentially is that organizations have looked across the spectrum and said, where I can use AI, I'm going to lean in and I'm going to place my bets. And I kind of alluded to some of the use cases. Sophia, at Heartbeat Health, have you considered using AI, or is it even on the radar of your executive team? And if so, what maybe very specific use cases are you thinking about?
So it's an interesting thing about AI because in the healthcare space, we use it on the product side. And what Trey was saying is, we're not talking about product AI. From my perspective, I'm pumping it into Salesforce, right? And into the CRM and using AI to generate kind of leads assessment. So is this a qualified lead? Is it better? Mind you, I'm doing that with me, myself, and I right now. So I look in the mirror and I go, hey, is this a good lead? I don't know. What do you think? So As your team grows though, and as your marketing organization is funneling in all of these kind of new leads into your pipeline, you want to have some sort of an AI up front because you might not have the resources to do it by hand. Make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe one last question from a practitioner. So as we've kind of talked about these different growth plays that you could implement, what are maybe the watch outs for people that are thinking about putting some of these in place?
So I think the biggest watch out is that cultural fit, right? Does that person really engage in the company? Do they really know? Some of the other watch outs are technology and the infrastructure. So making sure that you have the ability to right size the organization. And so you can throw out all the sales there, but if your technology doesn't support it, or if you can't onboard the clients in a fast enough time, that's a lost opportunity. And you only get those opportunities once, every so often. They don't come back around, and they don't sit around waiting for you either. So that's a couple of other ones.
Speed to action, love that. Awesome. Well, wonderful. Well, first and foremost, appreciate everyone's time. If there's additional questions, we're over at our booth at 12111, right on the corner there. There's also different ways to engage with us, which is there's a couple forums, there's some information, there's free benchmarking. We'd love to talk to you about your commercial model or what you're thinking about. But thank you for your time, and Sophia, thank you for joining us on stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to be here.
So.